was that?
I don't know, I was too busy talking to Big Nose.
I think it was Blessed Are the Cheesemakers.
What's so special about the cheesemakers?
Well, obviously, it's not meant to be taken literally. It refers to any manufacturers of dairy products.
Dr. Dale C. Allison Jr., thank you again. I've got a couple questions. I'm going to just tie them into one that are from Pine Creek, Doug. And he asks, is there myth contained within ancient Roman biography? Can you give an example outside the Gospels? And the fourth question, the reason why I said, well, it inevitably asks that there's another question, because you're asking outside the Gospels, assuming that you already think there's probably some type of myth within this biography of the Gospels. Could the Gospels be in the genre of mytho-history?
Okay, so I'm not sure what he means by mytho-history. If you mean that they are a combination of history and legend, and are mythological in that sense, then yes, I think the Gospels qualify on that score. Now, as far as Greco-Roman biography, sure, there are mythical things in them. The thing that pops into mind is in Plutarch's Life of Alexander. He has a story, or one story, about Alexander's conception, and it has to do with a god taking the form of a snake and crawling inside Alexander's mother while she's taking a bath in a pond, or something like this. And most of us would regard that as mythological, okay? Now, when it comes to the Gospels, I'm pretty middle of the road here, as is obvious from other interviews here we've had. I think there's history there. But if I look, for example, at Matthew's infancy narrative, I see very little history. I think Jesus was probably born during the reign of Herod the Great. I think his parents were named Mary and Joseph, and I think he was associated with Nazareth, but I don't see a lot more there. And I see, if you want to call it myth, I would prefer legend at this point, but I don't see history there in Matthew 1 and 2. I see legends that take up some history. For example, his parents were named Joseph and Mary, and they were probably pious. I mean, if you worked, you would probably get a few more memories there. But I don't think the massacre of the infants is history. I don't think the star is history, and so on. So the answer, I guess, is yes. But for me, 1 and 2 is then followed by chapter 3, and I do think that Jesus was baptized by a guy named John the Baptist, right? And I do think some of the sayings attributed to the Baptist probably represent what he was in part about. So it's a mixture, and actually that's why we have this whole discipline anyway. So I spent my life in the quest for the historical Jesus. Why is there a quest? Well, at some point we realize the Gospels don't agree on everything, and at some point we realize they're not pure history. There's more that is going on there. So the question is, how do we separate the history from the more that's going on there, or how do we distill some history, that sort of thing. So if I understand the question rightly, the presupposition of my work is, yeah, of course.
I think it is a question. Well, if I can give you a little background as to why. Many apologists that we encounter are starting to realize, and I know this is going to sound funny to you, this has been known for a long time, but it's almost like they're behind the learning curve on these things because they're trying to hold on to something. You know where I'm coming from with this. And Adam and Eve have been like this really interesting place that recently William Lane Craig has caught a lot of angry Christians have come at him because he said, well, it's mythological history. It's mytho-history is the term he used.
Okay.
And here you have, we're now going to the most sacred of areas, right, around Jesus the Christ. And they're going, no, 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 and they're acting like, but it's a different narrative, of course. I mean, you would think Adam and Eve is far more mythological, and it's pre-Diluvian or antediluvian, so that's a different thing, but they're not even granting these things you're saying. So they're asking someone who is a Christian, who does at the end of the day say, I believe, I am a believer, but I'm not going to be dishonest to a point where I'm not willing to consider how the literature is and what it's using. And still at the end of the day, you have found yourself being a Christian, which is what makes you unique. And I guess that would be the reason.
Well, part of the reason also is that, well, I did spend a little time in what you would call evangelical circles. I did grow up as a middle-of-the-road, mainstream Presbyterian church person. My dad was very liberal about lots of things. So I didn't grow up with the sort of, I don't know, I don't want to be pejorative here, but a lot of the anxieties my wife had, who was raised as a very conservative Baptist, and just worried about lots of things that I didn't. So I feel that there are groups of Christians or Christian bodies that just haven't gone through the Enlightenment, right? And I've gone through the Enlightenment. And so for me, for example, harmonizing texts or finding mythology in the Bible, those are just old hat. Those aren't the interesting questions. There are questions. I just take that for granted, that Adam and Eve might be real people. It doesn't even occur to me. It's just not. And that anyone would want to argue that, it doesn't occur to me. So, you know, I'm at a liberal school or mainline school, and you'd have to go back a long time to find people here anyway who were worried about that, were worried about Adam and Eve. What I tell my students is that, well, I remember a dinner I was having once. I was having a dinner with, actually it was Ed Sanders and Eric Myers and Carol Myers, who are archaeologists, right? So I just thought I'd ask them. Well, they're also Jewish, right? I thought, was there a real Moses? Was there a real Moses? Well, maybe there was something sort of. It wasn't a robust yes. How about that? It wasn't a robust yes. And I've asked other Old Testament scholars from time to time, and you know, there are lots of reasons for thinking that the conquest in Joshua just doesn't fit the data, right? So, I don't know, maybe Israel comes from Mesopotamia, and the idea about Abraham moving from between the rivers to Palestine, maybe there's some memory of the people there, and maybe, you know, there's something behind the story of the Exodus, but it's really hard to get to it. So my sense is that the Bible sort of gets more history as it moves forward, because I think there wasn't a Jewish state, and there almost certainly was a guy named Solomon and a guy named David and, you know, the other kings and so on, even if you find legendary elements in the stories about these people.
Yeah, like how big the kingdom was.
And so on. Anyway, the point is that that's the literary heritage that early Christians inherit, which is a book that has lots of memories in it, but also has lots of other things. And I think that's what they reproduce in their own movement. They have memories. I think Jesus was a very charismatic guy. I think he was very interesting. I think he said provocative things. He said and did the sorts of things that people might remember, right? And generated the responses that positive and negative, that people might remember. But that doesn't change the fact that these are not just history books, right?
So many questions. Thank you.
You hear that? Blessed are the Greek. The Greek. Well, apparently he's going to inherit the earth.